This happened years ago when I was a teen. I lived in a small house with my mother and stepdad. I never knew my real dad, but my stepdad was always there to help us out and seemed to get along well with my mom. We weren't wealthy, but my stepdad had a few prized possessions, one of which was his collection of all the Nightmare on Elm Street movies on VHS. We watched one of those movies just about every other night. I remember hating every single one of them. I was way too young to be watching scary movies like that. There wasn't much to do in my own room, and my stepdad would get offended if I showed that I wasn't interested in watching his movies with him. So I was basically forced to watch it in the living room with him and my mom. I must have seen each one at least a dozen times. I don't know how my parents could still be entertained by them, but they clearly enjoyed it every single time. Watching those movies constantly gave me terrible nightmares. I would spend countless nights tossing and turning, struggling to get to sleep because I was so afraid of my dreams. They were always the same. I would feel like I was in the movies, literally having a Nightmare on Elm Street, running for my life in the darkness being chased by Freddy Krueger. That wasn't even the worst of it either. Sometimes, about once a week, I would wake up from a nightmare and see Freddy Krueger standing in the corner of my room. I would always stare him down and rub my eyes, hoping he would go away, but he always remained. He would stand there, motionless, watching me sleep with a smile on his face. I usually just pretended it wasn't real and pulled the covers over my face so I wouldn't see him anymore. I was always scared that he would cut through the sheets and attack me, but I told myself every night that if I saw him that he was just in my imagination. It had to be the movie's fault. It couldn't actually be Freddy Krueger. I had to think so if I wanted to sleep at all. One day, after getting almost no sleep, I told myself that I wouldn't allow my silly imagination to get the best of me. Oddly enough, I didn't see him again for over 2 weeks. Of course, it was only a matter of time. One night, I woke up from a nightmare at 3 a.m. Freddy was in the same corner as always. I locked eyes with him, terrified, but trying desperately to work up the courage to confront him. This time, however, something was different. Freddy moved. He raised up his clawed hand and started waving it at me, taunting me with it. He then started clawing at the wall. Something was extremely wrong. He had never moved before. I sat there in my bed scared shitless. Now, I was just in the same situation I was every time I saw Freddy, petrified and helpless. It didn't seem like hiding under the sheets was a smart move. I was convinced Freddy was actually going to do something to me this night. All I could think to do was to see if he could talk to me.
Freddy? Is that you?
In an instant, Freddy was right on top of me. He laughed as he tried to pull the covers off the bed, cutting holes straight through them. He held me down with one hand and tormented me with the blades of his glove. I was sure it was the end, but I wasn't going down easy. I kicked and screamed and did everything I could to fight back.
No! Stop it! Stop it! Mom! Help me!
Freddy laughed so hard for so long that he must have run himself out of breath. I ran to my parents' room and barged in, frantically shaking my mom to wake her up. I told her what was happening, so she told me to stay put in her room while she called the cops. She then left the room. I could hear her shouting at the phone or whatever. Everything after that was kind of a blur, because the cops ended up showing up, but they never caught any Freddy Krueger. As the years have gone past and I've gotten wiser, I figured out what really happened. After that night, I never saw Freddy Krueger in my room, but more importantly, I never saw my stepdad again either. My mom never wanted to talk about it, and she even destroyed all my stepdad's VHS tapes. Nobody ever told me explicitly, but I eventually put it together that it must have just been my stepdad who was watching me sleep at night as Freddy Krueger. To dress up as Freddy Krueger and routinely terrorize me was just insane to me. For it to escalate to the point of him actually trying to attack me just scares the hell out of me. I see why my mom cut him out of our life, but I'm curious to see if he was charged or convicted of anything. I was traumatized by the entire ordeal, so I want to know more about what was behind it to help me heal. but it's still not something I think my mom is ready to talk about. This story was inspired by a creepy incident regarding a 47-year-old man named David Lamb, who would climb into the loft above children's bedrooms and scratch on the ceiling pretending he was Freddy Krueger from the Nightmare on Elm Street films. During a string of sick pranks, he hung 2 of the victims from a door frame so they could barely breathe and got his pet lizards to bite them. He bundled one victim into his car boot and drove around, and on another occasion beat him with a sweeping brush. Another victim was locked in a cupboard, left in a freezing cold bath and banned from using the toilet. Lamb even tried to scare the victims by playing the music from Jeff Wayne's War of the Worlds late at night. The victims were allegedly former partners. Lamb was arrested but failed to turn up for his trial. He was found in Bolton, hiding under the bed of his latest girlfriend, who was pregnant at the time with his child. He denied wrongdoing, claiming a former partner had a vendetta against him. After the hearing, a judge said, "I hadn't got a clue for what was going on, but he truly is a monster. He should be locked away for good." This happened a few years ago, back when I used to live in a small apartment in the quieter part of the city. Of course, I didn't like living alone. I only really had one problem in my life. It started happening right at the beginning of fall one year. I had these nightmares almost every night. It was like sleep paralysis. I kept seeing someone in my room, standing over me. If I had to describe it, it was something like a dark silhouette. It was terrifying. The figure in my room inched closer to me every night, and in each subsequent nightmare, the tightness in my chest gripped me harder, slowly paralyzing me until I could barely even breathe, let alone move to run or defend myself. Initially, I considered it to be a consequence of living alone for as long as I had. I figured it must have just been me being paranoid. However, after it went on like that for weeks, I started to get genuinely concerned. One morning, after a particularly terrifying nightmare, I decided it was time to see a therapist about it. The chronic fear was weighing on me mentally and physically. It had to stop. However, later that night, I was ridden with the same anxiety I had become used to before bed. I remember tossing and turning countlessly, trying to settle on a comfortable position that may allow me to sleep soundly.
No. Stop. I told you I'm 30. You don't need to wipe me anymore. What's making that noise? Maybe it's just the old building. What the hell? Oh God, it's him. I can see him. Stay away. I know you're not real. I've seen you 100 times before, and I know you can't hurt me. You're not real. This has to be a nightmare. I'm gonna wake up any second now. No. Why can't I move? Why? Get the hell away from me! Somebody help me! Go back to hell or I'm calling the cops! Get off me! Help! Somebody help me!
I barely managed to escape as the crazed freak chased me down my own house. Whoever this was definitely an intruder. I didn't know who this psycho was, but all I knew was that the freak was trying to slash me with whatever he was armed with. I managed to run out of my apartment building with minor cuts, sprinting down the street and screaming wildly for help. I got up to a random house and started banging on the door until they answered. I begged them to call 911. They seemed freaked out by me at first, but were willing to help me out. When the police arrived, the man who attacked me was long gone. I was taken to the hospital and treated, but I turned out fine physically. The problem is that I still haven't recovered mentally. All that chronic stress and fear in the beginning, all leading up to that godforsaken night. The dreams must have been premonitions. It's the only way I can explain how the man who attacked me matched up so well with the silhouette I kept seeing in my nightmares. The only other explanation was that he had been breaking into my room every single night for a month, but never got caught or attacked me until that random night. I was worried he would never be caught, but several days after the attack, the police found the man, but it was from a different incident. He had gone on a huge killing spree, taking out multiple people in their homes in the same fashion he was trying to do to me. The suspect in question, a 26-year-old man named Daniel Gonzalez, who had apparently been messed up his whole life and had recently been obsessed with horror movies so much that he wanted to recreate the killings in real life. I've been deeply traumatized by the attack. I had to move out of my apartment and live with my parents because I couldn't go back to where it happened. I'm still dealing with the intense paranoia and crippling insomnia years later. Every day, I'm scared he will show up to get the job done. And every night, I'm terrified that he might show up in my sleep again. Or maybe in my nightmares. This story was inspired by a man named Daniel Gonzalez, who had become notorious for being known as the Freddy Krueger killer. In September 2004, he had embarked upon a violent rampage across London and Sussex. Inspired by horror films such as A Nightmare on Elm Street and Friday the 13th, the 24-year-old loner took out 4 people over 2 days using a knife. Gonzalez would randomly select houses in North London to disturb his victims, and also attempted to take out another 2 men but was fought off and managed to escape. He was eventually caught while trying to board the London Underground, which was a maximum security hospital. Jurors decided that he was a drug-crazed, cold-blooded murderer and not suffering from mental illness as he claimed. Gonzalez was eventually jailed for life in 2006 and was found deceased the following year.
This happened to me 10 years ago. I was in high school, celebrating one of my last Halloweens where it still felt appropriate to go trick-or-treating. My friend Alex invited me over to stay the night at his house after we finished for the night. I agreed to it. It was usually fun to be at his house and stay up late away from my parents. That year, Halloween fell on a Friday, so I went the easy way and dressed up as Jason Voorhees. Alex, on the other hand, was a huge fan of Nightmare on Elm Street at the time, so he went as Freddy Krueger. I was impressed by his costume. I hadn't really put any effort into mine, but Alex had gone all out. He got the exact same sweater and hat Freddy Krueger wore, a really realistic looking Freddy Krueger mask, and he was in character every time we went up to someone's house. The centerpiece of his costume, however, was the glove. He made it by hand with real knives, and he wasn't scared to swing it around and show it off. Of course, when any adults asked about it, he said they weren't actually real blades, but I knew the truth. Alex showed me how real those blades were. He stole a jack-o'-lantern, then slashed the face to pieces in front of a bunch of middle schoolers just to screw with them. All in all, trick-or-treating that Halloween went well. We both got respectable loads of candy, but obviously Alex got more. When we got to his house after a few hours, we headed upstairs to his room to get out of our costumes and sort out our candy. Afterwards, we put on a movie. I wanted to play video games, but Alex was obsessed with The Nightmare on Elm Street and forced me to watch it with him. He said he'd seen it 12 times and it never got old, but I silently disagreed. Alex eventually turned off all the lights as we were watching it in the dark. About 30 minutes into the movie, when he was sure his parents were asleep, he pulled out a half-full bottle of vodka from under his bed. I was completely caught off guard. I had never had anything to drink except a couple of beers one time, and certainly not anything as strong as vodka. I was a little scared, but Alex was clearly excited about it. He grinned from ear to ear as he put the bottle up to his face, boasting about how he stole it from his parents' liquor cabinet the previous night. I told Alex I wasn't down. After constantly teasing me, I folded. That's when he started fixing us 2 cups mixed with some soda. I really didn't want to participate in the whole drinking thing. but I knew Alex wouldn't let me live it down if I backed out, so I just went along with it. As the movie progressed, I started taking light sips throughout. Alex kept pushing me to chug and drink bigger mouthfuls. The guy was super pushy that night. It seemed like he really wanted me to get wasted this Halloween. I eventually took a large gulp just to get him off my back. It was disgusting. It was way stronger than beer and I hated it. Somehow, Alex was chugging his down. I wondered if he had purposely made my drink stronger than his just to mess with me. As we watched the movie, I only took sparing sips, but after a while, Alex noticed that I hadn't asked for a refill yet, so he got mad and forced me to chug the entire rest of my cup and refill it. I told him to chill out, but he kept yelling in my face and threatened to kick me out, so I didn't. Towards the end of the movie, I started feeling extremely under the influence. I don't remember much after that. I just remember passing out. Later on, I woke up sometime later with all the TV and all the lights off. I could barely see, but then I noticed Alex standing in the corner of the room, blocking the door. He was in his Freddy Krueger costume again, taunting me with the blades on his glove. I had no idea how long he'd been watching me sleep. I was terrified of him as if he was the real Freddy Krueger. Alex, is that you? What are you doing? Suddenly, Alex lunged at me. He slashed me across the face before I could put my arms up. I pushed him back and grabbed a pillow because it was the only thing I could find to defend myself. I backed up into the corner and screamed for help as Alex kept trying to attack me.
Help! Help me! Someone get this psycho away from me!
A minute later, Alex's parents barged into the room and apprehended him. I was finally safe. I called my parents to come pick me up. Obviously, they weren't happy when I told them the reason for coming home early. The 6 of us all sat down at the dining table in Alex's house that night, discussing what happened. The cuts I received weren't bad enough for me to need to go to the hospital, but it was still a horrifying sight. His parents begged mine not to call the police, but after everything they heard take place, they did. Alex was arrested in his house, and I was taken home. Alex later confessed that he had laced the cup he made me drink with sedatives. He even admitted that he believed he was Freddy Krueger, and that's why he attacked me. He wanted to give me a real Nightmare on Elm Street death. Obviously, I haven't spoken to Alex in 10 years. What he did was unforgivable, and I still have nightmares about it today. The story was inspired by a horrifying incident regarding a man obsessed with the horror film character Freddy Krueger, who used a homemade bladed glove to slash his sleeping friend. A 37-year-old man named Jason Moore was jailed for life by a judge at the city's Crown Court. According to court records, Moore had watched Nightmare on Elm Street 20 times. He watched it just before the attack. Moore and Mr. Skamarski had been drinking cider together at Moore's home in the early evening, when Mr. Skamarski fell asleep on the sofa. After taking a sleeping pill, the victim, John Paul Skamarski, woke up to find himself being attacked by Moore, slashing him with the glove and a 10-inch bread knife. Moore said he could not remember the attack and said although he had made the glove, he never intended to use it. Police say they were pleased with the conviction in this extremely unusual case. Jailing Moore for a minimum of 4.5 years, Judge Michael Pert said, "You are an extremely dangerous man. You are obsessed in particular with the Freddy Krueger figure in Nightmare on Elm Street. What you were fascinated with was using that glove to take someone out. The person you chose was your friend who was asleep and had no reason to expect an attack." Speaking after the trial, Detective Sergeant Gary said the glove was one of the most frightening weapons he'd ever seen, and that a lot of skill had gone into creating that glove.